Hello all, thank you for joining us today. We're gonna sit tight for about another minute or so to let others join us, and then we will get started shortly. All right, well, I'm gonna get the ball rolling. Welcome to our final webinar in this series that Virginia Community Capital and Virginia Food Ship Capital have been hosting. Today, we are going to be discussing redefining food system equity and evaluating food system financing through research presented by Dr. Karen T. Jackson and Emily Sloss. I'm going to let you all know that we are recording this webinar session, and so it will be available for you to reference later. Let's see here, getting my notes up. Before we jump into the actual webinar, and as you are joining us, I always like to hear who you are, where you're coming from, what your hopes are for today. So in the chat box, I'm gonna post some questions and then invite you all to share as much as you would like about who you are, where you're from, and what you're looking forward to. So I mentioned that this webinar series has been hosted by Virginia Community Capital and Virginia Food Ship Capital. My co-host Michael Riley will share a little bit more about the history of these webinars, but just to let you know that we are both organizations that are considered community development financial institutions, and each of our institutions has a food financing program, and that's really been the inception for the webinar series and really diving into what are food system financing resources in the state of Virginia and how to think of them through the lens of equity. Today, our guests are joining us to further discuss that. As I mentioned, we have Dr. Karen Jackson and Emily Sloss. Dr. Karen Jackson is an assistant professor at North Carolina A&T State University, and she's also the principal consultant for Katalyst Innovative Consulting Services. And Emily Sloss is joining us from Self-Help Credit Union, where she is a food system program associate. I have a little bio that I'm going to read for both of them. Dr. Jackson is faculty in the Leadership Studies and Adult Education Department at North Carolina A&T State University, where she teaches research design, quantitative and qualitative research methods, ethics, and policy courses, and works with students to design their dissertation studies. Her work is grounded in systems and organization theory, policy studies, understanding of community engagement, equity, and social justice. She believes that understanding systems and policies that influence individuals' ability to navigate communities and organizations is important. Helping leaders understand how these systems and policies can create pathways and barriers, especially for underrepresented groups and people from low socioeconomic backgrounds, is a goal for her work. Dr. Jackson's research and evaluation team at Katalyst Innovative Consulting Services performed the external evaluation for the Healthy and Equitable Food Systems Capital Initiative with support from, with Self-Help Credit Union, with support from the Kellogg Foundation. Emily Sloss is the Food System Program Associate at Self-Help, where she manages the Healthy and Equitable Food Systems Capital Initiative. Her work focuses on local and federal policy, coalition building, and embedding food systems into Self-Help's work. She lives on a sheep farm in Hillsborough, North Carolina. So we are so excited to have our guests join us and to hear more about their work, and really to be a really great punctuation mark for this webinar series. Michael, do you want to share a little bit more about what the series has been and where it's taken us?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Lauren, and welcome everybody. Thank you all who have joined us here today. And thank you to Karen and Emily. I will turn it over to them here momentarily. But we're excited to wind down this series, at least for now. There, maybe a cameo here along the way or so in the future. But this is the last of what has been 6 sessions for us since August. So we kicked off in August, and I'll just kind of give a recap of what we've done for those of you maybe who might have missed some along the way. And then you can always go back and look at the recordings on the VCC website. But we kicked things off in mid-August. Seems like a very, very long time ago. Marlon Buckner was our first guest. Among many other hats he wears, Marlon is on the board of directors of the Reinvestment Fund up in Pennsylvania, and they are the administrators for the Healthy Food Financing Initiative around the country, and had some really insightful thoughts to share with us to kick off the series. We also had representatives from MAFRAC, which is an organization in the Mid-Atlantic that is promoting access to food. And so we had a great discussion on the work that they are doing. In the second session, which was also in August, we had Michael Carter from Carter Farms and the Small Farm Outreach Program, giving us more background about the history of Black farming in the region. And we were joined by Eric Benfeld as well from the Center for Food Systems and Community Transformation. In September, we had a great discussion with some folks from Good Food Markets, which is developing local retail markets in food desert communities in DC, Washington, DC and beyond. And then we were also joined by some representatives from St. Paul's Community Development Corporation in Norfolk, talking about the focus on food access following the closure of some retail grocery stores down there. I apologize, I got a phone going off here, but in October, we had representatives from Virginia Fresh Match talking about an excellent program to improve access to SNAP dollars here in Virginia. And then we jumped ahead, skipped a few months, and had a presentation a few weeks ago from VDAX about the new Virginia Food Access Investment Fund, which we're all very excited about here in Virginia. That was actually complemented as well with another discussion about Virginia Fresh Match. And so keep an eye on some news going on about the Food Access Investment Fund that is now in operation in Virginia and is really an innovative program and should be doing some great things in the year ahead. So with that, again, we turn it over to Karen and to Emily for our last session here today, and we're excited to hear what they have to say. So why don't you guys go ahead and take it away. Thank you again.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here today, and thank you to Lauren and Michael for hosting us, even though we're your neighbors to the south. So Self-Help Credit Union, where I work, is a credit union and community development financial institution that's headquartered in Durham, North Carolina, but we have credit union branches across the country. Self-Help's mission is to create and protect ownership and economic opportunity for all, while focusing on benefiting those underserved by conventional lenders. In my role at Self-Help, I'm on the policy team and work with our commercial lenders, branch network, and real estate team to create opportunities for food system entrepreneurs. Thanks to the generous support of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, we were able to launch the Healthy and Equitable Food System Capital Initiative in 2017, with the purpose of increasing capital access for food and farm businesses, in particular for entrepreneurs of color. We'll be discussing the initiative today, as well as evaluation strategies to measure food system equity. I want to thank Kellogg Foundation for making this work possible. And now I'm going to hand it over to you, Karen, to get us started. Oh, you're muted.
I'm muted. Just trying that out. Hello, everybody. So I am going to, unfortunately, not be able to use the slideshow function so that I can see my notes. But I just want to say I'm excited to be here to share some of the work that we've been doing with the Capital Access Initiative at Self-Help. And we have, hopefully, what you guys will find some interesting information from the external evaluation of the program. And hopefully this is not going to be too difficult for you guys to see. Lauren, at least you can see the slides, right?
Yep, and I do think there's a slideshow function where you can see the notes, but if this is working for you, go for it.
Okay. So I want to first start off by thanking Lauren and Michael for having us on the program today. Lauren started meeting with Emily and I at our biweekly meetings back in the fall. And it was awesome because she came along right when we were starting to work on the dissemination phase of the work that we were doing with the initiative. So Lauren, just having some of the brainstorming conversations was very powerful to have Lauren in the room and asking really good questions, powerful questions, as we were working on designing and development of the dissemination products from the work. And I also want to just thank Emily, because Emily's just been just a wonderful person to work with. And the work that they've done has been tremendous. And I hope you guys will feel the same way when we're done sharing. So just a little bit of background about my team. I have two associates that worked on the external evaluation with me. Dr. Ernest Cuthbertson, who worked as a research analyst, brought out a big piece of the historical perspective. And I say that he's like my brain, he's my brain trust. He has lived in North Carolina and specifically the Triad area for almost 30 years. And his family has farmland in the Guilford County area. So he has a lot of historical perspective with respect to Black farmers in North Carolina that gave me a perspective I didn't have because I didn't grow up in this area. I'm from the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And then my other part of my team, Olivia Pietrofeza, is a data analyst, and she works on a farm in Illinois. So we had two farmers on the team with me. And so I was really glad to have them be a part of this and bring that perspective to the work. So just a little bit of background about the initiative. The Healthy and Equitable Food Systems Capital Initiative aims to increase capital access for food enterprises, ranging from farmers to food processors, distributors, and hubs, and to grocers serving low-income communities. The aims of the initiative are to build lending and economic development strategies that strengthen the sustainable food system by creating a national network of lenders and organizations that will improve capital access for underserved food entrepreneurs, and to leverage the healthy food system lending experience and organizational connections of the Center for Community Self-Help to create partnerships that can increase capital delivery to the innovative borrowers that are most in need. So the activities that Self-Help believed would help to achieve those aims include identifying and engaging the entrepreneurs of color and CDFIs, designing and developing methods of tracking data and connecting relevant stakeholders to that data, collaborating to build and establish important partnerships, and then fourthly, communicating important information in a variety of forms. So you should be able to see my outcomes slide now. And so the intended outcomes of the initiative, we put into three kind of buckets: a policy bucket, process, people, and then capital access and delivery. And we summarize those outcomes into 6 statements. So a strong national network of lenders and organizations committed to improving the capital flow to food system entrepreneurs across the food system was the first outcome, intended outcome. Collaborating between conventional lenders, CDFIs, the farm credit system, sustainable agriculture, and healthy food organizations in order to build a borrower pipeline and increase referrals between those that are disconnected to funding is the second outcome. The comprehensive resource loan products of CDFIs and agricultural lenders and community banks wanted to build a connection between debt and equity, work together to do that. Also wanted to do a legal and data analysis to understand capital gaps and identify predatory lending practices. The fifth intended outcome of the initiative was to have successful collaboration and discussion regarding federal policy among a small targeted group of CDFIs, and that hopefully that they would work actively in the healthy food system in hopes of informing the Farm Bill and other health and food system focused legislation. And then lastly, the sixth intended outcome would be that there would be improved data tracking, measurement, and a deeper understanding of the food system and its impact on local economies and the broader community. So when I became involved, the initiative was entering its second year. They spent the first year developing the ideas around how to address, to engage in the activities. So when I came along, they were in full swing, engaged in activities, designing activities, engaging with entrepreneurs, not just on the East Coast and in North Carolina, but Self-Help also has branches in Illinois, California. So there was work happening across the country. One of my first experiences was with the Bugs Conference. Some of you might be familiar with it. It's the Black Urban Growers Conference. So I attended that conference in Durham, North Carolina in 2018. And it was the first conference that I can remember going to where I immediately felt connected with the people. And one of the reasons I feel like I felt connected is because I often say that when I put my hands in the dirt, because even though I'm not like a farmer, I do like to grow things. And when I put my hands in the dirt, I really feel connected. And when I got introduced to Leah Penniman and I started to read some of the things that some of her writing, she calls the soil. She says there's a healing power in the soil. And it was at the Bugs Conference where I first learned of her. She's the owner of Soulfire Farm in Grafton, New York, and the author of Farming While Black, which is she calls Soulfire Farm's Practical Guide to Liberation on the Land. In 2013, Penniman negotiated a deal with the Albany County District Attorney's Office to allow area youth to abbreviate their juvenile detention sentences and earn food for their families by logging time at Soulfire Farm. The farm expanded its mission to include the cultivation of entrepreneurs of color in 2012. Penniman, who now hosts an intensive week-long course for Black Latin farmers, says that the end game for her work is land and food sovereignty for disenfranchised populations. So one of the reasons I bring that to the forefront here is because the work of this initiative, we looked at multiple populations and the impact of things like this innovative approach that Leah Penniman is taking to connecting her farm to issues within the Black community is something of interest to us. So we believe that Penniman's concern for her community to have healthy food is warranted, right? So many large corporations we know aim junk food ads at low-income communities. That could explain the $7 billion per year SNAP funding spent on unhealthy processed foods. Lack of healthy foods contributing to what the Surgeon General equates to what he calls a health crisis, and he also calls it a threat to national security. The health crisis is directly related to the food we have access to or lack of access to healthy food. So the food system, we know, also means different things to different people. For some, it means the difference between quality, the taste of the food that they put in their body. For others, it means revenue, expenditures for their restaurants, farms, markets, grocery stores, or corporations, right? For some people, they consider the land, environment, climate justice when they're thinking about the influence growing food has on carbon cycles. You know, this is something that we learned about in school. Science has also taught us about the effects food has on our physical, mental, emotional health. having enough healthy food can literally mean the difference between living and dying. In our current food system, the government, corporations, lobbyists have one level of influence, while growers and distributors, shippers, buyers, and sellers have another level of influence. And we all need one another, but some exercise more influence than others. And their interests and values play a part in how they decide what to invest in most. So many farmers we know live below the poverty line and have no health care. And we know that the average restaurant worker makes about $10 an hour. So one of the things we wanted to do is look at redefining equity in the food system. So we had to look at some data. The Pew Research Center data that we looked at kind of helped us to paint a baseline picture of the racial wealth divide when it comes to looking at healthy food entrepreneurs and their access to capital. Whites in the United States have access to $142,000, while African Americans have access to about $11,000 when it comes to the common funding path from family and friends. According to the Census Bureau, $30,000 is the capital starting point to get a startup off the ground, which leaves the African American startups at a significant disadvantage. Wealth building through entrepreneurship, we know, is one recommended strategy to address racial inequities, and it's a goal of this capital access initiative. Other recommended strategies for increasing equity in the food system include promotion of land ownership for people of color that own land not be exploited, opening up the barriers that we know are out there to capital access, building capacity and or sustaining healthy food businesses for people of color, removing barriers so that they can sustain those businesses. Policies that create health disparities for people of color in poor communities and disproportionately for people of color, abolish those policies, and create opportunities to raise awareness of financial support programs. So research shows that systems and policies created to provide opportunities and build wealth for white entrepreneurs also creates barriers for Black and Hispanic entrepreneurs. And these challenges to gaining access to capital have historical roots in racism, and some tend to believe that the solutions are complex. However, research also has many examples of simple solutions that can be addressed from inside financial institutions and within the financial institutional network. So what we have to share with you today are we will share some of what we've found in researching the work that we've worked on. So our overall hypothesis for this work is that with a more integrated regional food network, the long-term opportunities for entrepreneurship and innovation will improve. And in turn, that will contribute to social, ecological, and economic resilience. So when we say integrated regional food network, we're referring to the connection between and interaction between people, place, and prosperity with respect to social, economic, and ecology. And we're talking about regional food network marketing, which includes direct to consumer, local, regional, intermediated sales to retail restaurants, institutions, or distributors, and those that maintain a regional place of origin. And then with resilience, we're referring to the capacity of a system to absorb disturbance and to reorganize while undergoing change. So, we've got a prime example for that right now with COVID, where we've got an entire system that's in the midst of a disturbance that we can study. And so we will end our talk today by sharing some findings from the PPP program at the Center for Community Self-Help. Specifically for community resilience, we'll talk, we mean supporting the broader regional resilience that relies on the sense of place, access to jobs, affordable food and housing, general health, and ability to rebound after variable economic, social, or ecological shocks. So a little bit more data, background data. So Black farmers, we know, are a group of entrepreneurs that we are interested in for this initiative because of the historical systemic racism issues. It's relevant to the overall aims of the initiative. There were over 900,000 Black farmers in the United States in 1920. Today, of the country's 3.4 million total farmers, only 1.3%, or a little over 45,000, are Black, according to the United States Department of Agriculture, numbers from spring of 2019. About 0.52% of America's farmland. That's about how much Black farmers own. By comparison, 95% of US farmers are white. The Black farmers who have managed to hold on to their farms make less than $40,000 a year as compared to $190,000 a year for white farmers. So it's this is a quote here from someone that some you guys may know, Reynard Turner. He's a former member of the Future Farmers of America and a board president for the Virginia Association for Biological Farming. He talks about the ways that we are addressing some of the food issues, like community gardens. Those things are good, but owning a piece of the rock, he says, is the only way that we can achieve equity in the food system. So just as a bit of a reminder, for the evaluation, we designed collaboratively worked with Emily's team to design a theory of change. We've already talked a little bit about the aim and the outcomes. This theory change diagram shows you the outcomes and the aim aligned with the activities. And so just as a reminder, what we believed here is that if we engaged in these activities, that would lead to engaging with the right people and making changes in relevant policies and processes, and that would increase the capital access and delivery for entrepreneurs of color. We also believe that these activities would ultimately increase capital access for food enterprises, ranging from farmers to food processors, distributors and hubs, and to grocers serving low-income communities. So our evaluation approach was to, because this initiative, the Healthy and Equitable Food Systems Capital Initiative, was in its early stages of program development, when we came in as the external evaluation team, we decided that we'd use a developmental evaluation approach, which uses mixed methods for data collection. This made it really easy to integrate what's called the equitable evaluation principles. The three basic principles of equitable evaluation include evaluation and that the evaluation work should be in service to equity. The evaluation work should also be designed and implemented commensurate with values underlying equity work. And then thirdly, the evaluative work can and should answer critical questions about the ways in which historical and structural decisions have contributed to the condition to be addressed. The effect on strategy of the underlying systemic drivers of inequity should also be addressed in the evaluation, and the ways in which cultural context is tangled up in both the structural conditions and the change of the initiative itself. So data-informed metrics that we use to measure the Healthy and Equitable Food Systems Capital Initiative food system impact included both quantitative and qualitative measures, because mixed methods are recommended for understanding transformation and racial justice issues. So now, Emily, now that we've examined some of the people, processes, and policy and capital access to better understand some of the challenges, Emily's going to share with you one of the cases that's related to federal policy. And then I'll come back to you and talk with you a little bit about the Paycheck Protection Program and some of the processes and technical assistance issues within commercial lending that we were able to look at through the lens of external evaluation. Emily?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. So I'm going to discuss one example from our research and policy approach to increasing capital access for food and farm businesses. So to better understand gaps in capital access, it was critical that we investigate and evaluate Farm Credit, who is the single largest holder of farm debt, of land and operational debt. So Farm Credit holds 40% of all farm debt, totaling about $159 billion. The Farm Credit system is a government-sponsored enterprise, which is structured as a borrower, a set of borrower-owned cooperatives. And the Farm Credit system was created by Congress in 1916 to provide reliable capital for farmers, agricultural communities, and rural America, many of whom at the time were ignored by traditional lending. So as a government-sponsored enterprise, Farm Credit enjoys an implicit government guarantee, which affords the Farm Credit institution significant tax and funding advantages. And so we really wanted to investigate if Farm Credit was true to its roots of, serving those who are underserved by traditional lending. So we partnered with Alcorn State University, which is an 1890 land grant HBCU in Mississippi, and they have a socially disadvantaged farmer and rancher policy center. And we, with them, asked them to help us investigate the leadership structures of Farm Credit, as well as surveying socially disadvantaged farmers in the South about their experience accessing capital from Farm Credit. So Alcorn provided a gender and race analysis of the governing bodies of leadership staff for the 69 Farm Credit associations throughout the country. 56 of these associations had sufficient data to report on. And of these organizations, the total leadership representation was 87% male and 99% white. While the racial discrimination within the USDA towards farmers of color has been widely documented, there's less data available about Farm Credit's practices towards farmers of color. So Alcorn surveyed and collected data from socially disadvantaged farmers about their perceptions and experiencing accessing capital from Farm Credit and the Farm Service Agency in 4 southeastern states, which were Alabama, Mississippi, North Carolina, and Virginia. And some of these key takeaways were that the levels of awareness of the financial support programs is low, with only about 40% of farmers being aware of the FSA programs and 56% being aware of the Farm Credit programs. The proportion of disadvantaged farmers applying for financial support is also low, ranging from 17% for FSA and 32% for Farm Credit. Some of the reasons for denial of financial support include, the top 3 reasons are insufficient credit, insufficient collateral, and incomplete applications. Of the socially disadvantaged farmers surveyed, the majority held the belief that the employees of the financial agencies are not helpful to them in navigating the often complicated application process, and generally feel discouraged about seeking financial support from federal agencies. So there's growing sentiment that Farm Credit is not doing enough to reach socially disadvantaged farmers, particularly given their status as a government-sponsored enterprise. In thinking about how Farm Credit can better serve all farmers, Self-Help looked into our previous experience with government-sponsored enterprises, particularly the federal home loan banks, whose member banks provide the largest source of home mortgages in the US. And in order to provide capital access to more homeowners, the federal home loan banks are required to allocate 10% of their net profits each year towards affordable housing program grants. So in 2016, that 10% set aside amounted to over $324 million that was used to subsidize affordable housing units. And so if we look at this same model and apply it to the Farm Credit system, an annual 10% grant set aside for equitable food system operations has the potential to create an annually reoccurring pool of $500 million that would support local and regional food system enterprises. So Farm Credit makes approximately $5 billion a year in profits, and 10% of that would equal $500 million. So this proposed grant set aside has real potential to strengthen farm credit while building local and often rural markets and increasing access to healthier and local grown food. And so this could have a really big impact and achieve, our goals of increasing pools of capital that are available to entrepreneurs in the food system. And so in order to create this grant set aside, it would take an act of Congress, which has potential to occur in the next Farm Bill, which is expected in 2023. And so similarly, this many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the Justice for Black Farmers Act that was introduced in November 2020. And so there's some really exciting credit proposals in that legislation that would bring about policy change by correcting historic racism within the USDA, increasing capital access for Black farmers. So anyways, being able to look at working with Alcorn to address and look at the data about how farm credit has fallen short in serving socially disadvantaged farmers helped us really develop some future policy proposals that might be able to address some of these issues. So now I'll hand it back over to Karen to discuss process and technical assistance.
Thanks, Emily. So I also want to point out the work with Alcorn. Alcorn is for those of you that might not know, Alcorn State University is in northwestern Mississippi. It's a historically Black college. So some of the ways that self-help integrated the voices of Black and Brown people and other people from underrepresented groups into the initiative, I think was done really well done and unique to a lot of initiatives that are attempting to address problems that are related to community issues for people of color. So the quotes that you see on this slide are from participants of a meeting that was held as a part of our initiative back in November of 2019, which seems like eons ago at this point in time. But we went to Little Rock, Arkansas, and we brought together a network of 60 funders, philanthropies, practitioners, and convening partners in Little Rock. And the aim of the Equitable Food and Farm Financing working meeting was so we had 3 short-term goals and 2 long-term goals. The 3 short-term goals were 1, to identify a group of national food system finance stakeholders operating within a racial equity frame. 2, to create an opportunity for groups to share successful and unsuccessful equitable underwriting techniques so that lenders and funders could share the learnings. And 3, to document those techniques and to create a paper to share with a wider group of lenders and funders. And then the 2 long-term goals were to engage a diverse group of CDFIs and other community-oriented or mission-aligned lenders and investors in ongoing conversations around bridging the capital gap for entrepreneurs of color. And secondly, to increase knowledge sharing to identify larger sector solutions for ongoing issues with capital access. As you can see from these quotes from meeting participants, credit policy, risk, and loan technical assistance were at the forefront of the participants' minds during the meeting, which is why this next example that I'll share is important. So the Carmine method is an innovative approach to commercial lending and is unique in its lack of requirements compared to conventional loan underwriting and includes an ample amount of training and weekly meetings for clients. Program performance metrics collected by client surveys include characteristics of peer group methods, program structure, individual behavior incentives, confidence, group responsibilities, leadership skills, and teamwork. The program, named the Solidarity Microfinance Operation, occurred over 5 years and had 284 cumulative loan clients who represented a culturally diverse population. The program data showed that 99% they had a 99% loan repayment rate, and that clients that experienced an increased average income and increased savings. So that's an example from research, and the Garmy method is well documented. So directly connected to this initiative is a program called the Runway Project in Oakland, California. It's an example. They used the Garmy method model and achieved similar results to what I just shared with you with the clients that were a part of the Runway project in Oakland. They were able to leverage philanthropy to provide low interest rate loans and partner with community-based technical assistance organizations. The Runway Project closed the seed funding gap that typically comes from family and friends by providing affordable financing to 13 early and expansion stage Black-owned businesses in Oakland. The Runway founder, Jessica Norwood, says the Runway metaphor came to us naturally during the first stages of the project. So in conversations, we kept hearing the same thing over and over again. This is Jessica talking, that the underlying problem we are trying to solve is not so much related to the entrepreneurs themselves as it is to the infrastructure around them. What we are trying to solve is not a pilot problem, it's a runway problem. So that's why they named it Project Runway. So another woman that was directly connected to Runway Project, Annie McShears, helped lead the launch of a partnership to support Black entrepreneurs in Oakland and expanded it to Richmond and San Francisco, California. The purpose of the partnership was to, again, continue to lend those gap funds to Black and brown healthy food entrepreneurs that could not access those funds from friends and family in the early stages. In this particular instance, when they did this expansion, technical assistance was provided by Optima Hub to the Runway Project entrepreneurs. They were able to add 7 additional entrepreneurs of color to get access to capital. And to date, the loans are structured to make, some of the limitations that we see right now are that to date, the loans are structured to make very small payments. So sustainability of the payments is still being determined. And another caveat for replication to consider is that the quality and cost of Optima's technical assistance is key and subsidized. So Runway is actively still engaged in providing capital access and business development technical assistance to entrepreneurs of color, and hoping to take this and build it out to the next level. So we're getting close to the close. I know we're about 15 minutes out, and I do want to leave time for discussion, but I don't want to leave out PPP and talk a little bit about moving forward other options for measuring equity in the food system. So talk a little bit about the CARES Act. We all know back in March 2020 that the CARES Act enabled us to be able to offer funds to businesses. Specifically, the bill provides for automatic, it established support for small businesses in response to COVID. And it also provided automatic forgiveness of any paycheck protection loans that are not more than $150,000. We also know that there are some other stipulations in the bill that could create challenges for folks that are receiving those loans. So the lending institutions or self-help was able to provide some PPP loans and deliver those to date of when we did this external evaluation, which we wrapped the external evaluation up back in right before Christmas. So the numbers, a little over 183 million in PPP loans have been delivered to a little over 1,700 businesses and nonprofits. 59% of those borrowers were businesses owned by or led by people of color, and combined, close to 20,000 jobs were maintained. 184 small food businesses accessed over $18 million in PPP loan funds. The top 5 types of small food business loans made by dollar amount were to full service restaurants and limited service restaurants, supermarkets and other grocery caterers, and community food services. These 128 businesses received a total of $13,470,132. So while the majority of the PPP food business loans were made to minority small businesses, the largest dollar amount of those loans, over $10 million, went to white-owned small food businesses. So we know the capital gaps exist, and what is described here as the racial wealth gap endemic in the United States also contributes to the fact that while a business may have been in existence for many decades, their cash reserves, amount of collateral, and credit worthiness still may not be up to a level that a financial institution finds debt ready or loan ready. The Center for Responsible Lending research shows the administration of the PPP program, the application process, and the fee structure made it extremely difficult for small businesses, and particularly businesses owned by people of color, to qualify for assistance or receive it in time to save their businesses and the jobs of the employees that depend on them. So just a little bit about measuring equity and options for measuring equity. When I see quotes like the one that's shown here, it makes me want to ask more questions, get more information. I know for sure that there are so many approaches to choosing appropriate measures, and not all approaches are equal or equitable. The Center for Regional Systems at Michigan State University has established recommended equitable food system metrics in the areas of food access, food and farm business, food chain labor, and food movement. The metrics in the example I will show you next are on this list. As noted by the entrepreneurs interviewed for this work, stories are also powerful forms of information, and their use as measures of influence and effectiveness is supported by multiple equity-based organizations and recommended by the Center for Environmental Farming Systems at North Carolina A&T State University's Committee on Racial Equity in the Food System, or CORE. The Sustainable Food Trust is using its global voice to promote an approach called the Economics and Ecosystems of Biosystems Evaluation Framework, which include metrics for equity and sustainability, which are fundamental and necessary when measuring food systems. I know that some of you are familiar with EFOD, the Equitable Food Oriented Development. It is a development strategy that uses food and agriculture to create economic opportunities, healthy neighborhoods, and explicitly seeks to build assets, pride, and power by and with historically marginalized communities. I find it interesting that from a measurement perspective, that characteristics of equitable evaluation principles are directly aligned with EFOD. And Lauren, I know that we need to stop here, but just really quickly, I want to talk a little bit about results-based accountability, because I do believe that there's a lot of promise for anyone that's looking to build out and to develop any grants, grant proposals where they need to evaluate and measure equity in the food system. This is an approach that I recommend, along with the ones that I just mentioned. I would recommend that people investigate or ensure that they hire evaluators that are using these approaches that are incorporating mixed methods and equitable evaluation practices. The results-based accountability approach can begin to help us understand the changes we're making in the food system, because it can help our understanding of the effectiveness of our work on performance and population. And it incorporates both qualitative and quantitative metrics, which is required when examining, like I said earlier, racial justice related programs. It gives us looking at how much did we do, How well did we do? How hard did we try? And what changes did we produce? These are the main questions that are asked. And here, what we see on the screen is an example. I used the Farm Credit Reform Form as an example here. And so what you see are potentially the metrics you can use to answer those questions. And the example here, the metrics are aligned with those that I just mentioned come from the Equitable Food Systems metrics that have been recommended and established by the Center for Regional Food Systems at Michigan State University. And I'm going to stop there because we have 8 minutes left. And I don't know if there are any questions in the queue.
Thank you, Karen and Emily. Karen, I think I'm going to stop sharing. Or do you want to go to the slide of your contact information?
Sure.
So we have a few more minutes left. I know that there are a few questions that have been actively answered. Just so that everyone knows, I don't know if you had a chance to see the Q&A, that there was a question about getting the study results from Alcorn State University, and Emily has responded that not yet, but soon, hopefully. And then as well, just to clarify that it's the Grameen method that Karen has referenced. Emily or Karen, do you have anything else that you want to share about those questions? And if anyone else has questions, in the chat box, please let us know, and we're happy to.
We do have another question, but why don't we let Karen and Emily answer and address that, and then we'll get to the other questions, so we have time for that, just so you all know.
I didn't mean to stop share there. I was just clicking through here, and we go back to that. So was the question about just the spelling of the Grameen? Did we?
More so about the Alcorn State University. Emily, I don't know if you want to speak to what your response was or elaborate.
Yeah, sure. So we're continuing to do work with Alcorn this year, and they are going to expand the research that they did to include additional states, so that it's a more comprehensive report. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to share something sometime this year. But yeah, and we can work with you all to post a link somewhere once we have that.
That's great. So we do have an open question, and it's the question is, it would seem that participatory methods for impact evaluation would be appropriate, particularly for new programs. What do you think?
Participatory methods for impact evaluation. Yes. So we did have, if the question is, did we have any entrepreneurs participate in this evaluation? The answer is yes. So the quotes that you saw on one of the slides, both from the meeting and from the technical assistants, were directly from participants, entrepreneurs. So yes, entrepreneurs were participants in the evaluation, and I completely agree that they should be. Hopefully that answers that question.
I think I'm just taking a look at the question. I think both about what your methodology was, but as well what your judgment is on that, if you would agree.
Right. So I mean, participatory, research, participatory evaluation, basically from my practice of it is that you have the participants that you're studying be a participant in the work. So there's like a range of participation. So do they participate in the design and development of the work or the evaluation? Are they participating in just contributing information? So that's another level of participation. So with respect to our approach, they participated by providing information. They did not participate in the design and development of the evaluation per se in the beginning, but after, I would say within the first year and a half, after those relationships were developed, we did integrate their thoughts into how we were doing the evaluation work. So if that, I don't, again, I don't see the question. So I don't know if I'm answering it, but I'm happy to talk more about any form of evaluation. Where, Lauren,
Seems like you did, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully I answered it, and I don't see who asked the question, nor do I see the question. So
I just want to throw out there, Karen, you mentioned the farm bill, and we didn't get too much into that, but I'm thinking maybe that could be a topic for another webinar down the road. We could probably spend hours talking about that, and we'd love to maybe someday hear your thoughts as to what we all on this call can do to advocate for changes in the next cycle of the farm bill, because so much, at least from what I know, what limited I know, is going to be difficult to change until policy at the federal level is in lockstep with a lot of the things that we want to do on the ground. And so supporting changes in the farm bill and really voting for those changes with the people who are representing us in Congress seems to me like going to be so critical here in the very immediate future for the next farm bill cycle to really get some of those changes going.
That's powerful, Michael. I mean, you're absolutely right. Any approaches to farm bill policy change will need to be, in my opinion, very directed and very strategic. So we all know that, in order to have any kind of influence in that area, you have to have somebody that's at the table, that's doing, that's going to be voting, and has the ability to get the information into the bill. So, you need to know what it is that you want in the bill, first of all, and that it actually will work, and that you have the constituencies around you that have the power and support. So, I mean, one of the things I feel like self-help spent a ton of time doing, and I feel like doing really well, is pulling together their collaborative network, and in such a way that they can't directly influence policy, but they can ensure that that the network is aware that there's a need that for the policy to be changed, and here's, based upon our research, here's what we believe needs to be changed, and to pull the right people together and get them in the same room. So, leveraging whatever power you have to pull the right people together and get them in the same room, talking to each other, is golden. I mean, that's gold right there. And doing it over and over again, because one time's not enough.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also for folks too who want to maybe stay informed about these issues, the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition is an advocacy organization. They do an amazing job on following policy in Washington, D.C. They have a very powerful equity component to their work. So if any of you really do want to really say, you want to stay informed, and you're saying, how do I do that? NSAC, National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, just Google them, or we can throw it in the chat here if we can quickly. They're a good way to stay informed. But I think we're really at the top of the hour here, so I'll save for myself. Thank you very much to Emily and Karen and Lauren. You want to take it away for some final words?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, this is, it's bittersweet to have this series end, because it's been really as much of a real-time learning opportunity for Michael and I as it has been to share with you all. And by no means, we're just beginning to wrap our arms around the iceberg that is figuring out food system financing and ensuring that it's equitable. And we hope that, in the future, we're able to continue to offer resources and provide information. I think what CDFIs can do really well is to play the middleman between the need and the resource. And so if you are not familiar with Virginia Community Capital or Virginia Food Check Capital, Michael and I are both there and active, and along with others that we've heard from over the course of the webinar series, dedicated and committed to ensuring that the resources that you all need for your food system projects, businesses, organizations are within reach. So stay tuned for more information. I've put the link to the VCC website where all the webinars have been recorded and archived. And we look forward to hopefully having more conversations in the future. Karen, Emily, thank you so much for joining us and for helping us finish off this series with a really powerful and compelling set of research and of stories to share about how much is before us, but also how much has come so far in ensuring that there's equity within the food system.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. Hopefully.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you all
for joining us. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.